Hi, I'm Claire. The last time my mother touched my face, it wasn't with affection, it was with precision. A slap so clean it felt rehearsed. My brother clapped. My father sipped his wine like he'd waited years for that moment. And Vanessa. She just smiled like she was back on stage. That night, I didn't break down. I broke pattern. See, silence was always the family currency. We traded shame in whispers and called it decorum. I used to think I was just the black sheep. Turns out I was the insurance policy they didn't expect to come due. I left without a word, but I took everything they gave me, memories, receipts, signed documents, mistakes, and I waited. Waited for the right moment. The moment came wrapped in ivory cardstock, pretending to be an invitation. What they didn't know is I already RSVP'd. Not to the party, to the reckoning. But before we go further, I want to know, what would you have done if the people who raised you treated your silence like a favor they could revoke at will? Drop your answer. Or don't. But stay. Because this story doesn't start with betrayal. It starts with a name they tried to erase. Mine. The envelope wasn't just cream-colored paper, it was a trap dressed in perfect cursive. It lay atop a week-old stack of ignored obligations, final notices, crumpled receipts, and an unopened copy of The Wild Iris with a coffee stain bleeding through its cover. Outside, Cambridge moved through autumn like it was holding its breath, leaves mid-fall, sky drained of hue. Claire leaned against the kitchen counter, one hand wrapped around a chipped mug, the other refusing to touch that envelope again. She'd already opened it. Of course she had. Curiosity was crueler than dignity. Inside a single ivory card with embossed lettering read, "You are cordially invited to the engagement celebration of Vanessa Jennings and Mason Clark. Hosted at the Jennings family estate. A RSVP line. A date. A promise." 2 years ago, Claire had signed hospital documents on behalf of her mother, post-op, drowsy, vulnerable. That had meant trust. At least that's what they told her. Then, without explanation, phone calls evaporated. Messages turned blue but stayed unanswered. Frank sent a terse, "Hope you're well last Thanksgiving," and Mason's LinkedIn silently removed her as a co-founder of the failed biotech startup she built from blood and burnout. Silence became its own kind of inheritance. And now, this. She picked up the envelope again, turning it over like it might whisper a motive. The Jennings didn't ask unless they needed. Vanessa especially, Princess Perfect, who'd once let Claire take the fall for a broken perfume bottle just to save face at a debutante dinner. Attending would mean walking back into a house where chairs were still warm from betrayal. Not attending. That felt like surrender. Cowardice dressed in principle. Claire inhaled. The air smelled faintly of stale basil and the window insulation she never got around to replacing. She glanced at the train schedule pinned to her fridge with a wine cork magnet. The 9:05 a.m. Amtrak from South Station to New Haven. A clean 4-hour ride, plenty of time to recompose rehearsed smiles, recalibrate venom into civility. She dropped the envelope onto the counter and walked to her closet. A sea of neutral tones greeted her, but the red dress practically barked her name from the back. Silk. Spaghetti straps. A plunging neckline that Eleanor once labeled performative. Claire had kept it out of spite. As she unhooked it, the fabric flowed like liquid memory. Her hand paused at the hem, remembering Grandpa William's voice the night before his stroke, warm with bourbon and warning. "Don't walk away from a fire you didn't light. Watch it burn from the front row." She smirked. In the bathroom mirror, Claire gathered her hair, twisting it into a deliberate knot. Not an ounce of softness. No earrings. Minimal makeup. Just sharp angles and unapologetic intent. "You want a show?" she murmured, zipping the dress with precision. "I'll give you one. Just not the ending you expected." She shut off the lights in sequence room by room until the apartment exhaled into darkness. No note left behind. No message to clients rescheduling work. Just a suitcase by the door, a coat draped on top, and a MetroCard tucked in the pocket like a quiet resolve. I left the apartment in silence. But in my chest, something old had started breathing again. Name the butler asked, not even looking up. Not even pretending I constitute. Claire adjusted the strap of her red dress and resisted the urge to offer sarcasm instead of her surname. But the effort of silence she'd learned was often the louder rebellion. "Claire Jennings," she said evenly. A flicker of confusion passed through his brow, then vanished beneath protocol. "Guest," he mumbled, scribbling something on a place card and gesturing toward the east wing with a gloved hand. Not the ballroom. Not the conservatory with the champagne. Not the west wing where the family portraits lined the hallway like saints with secrets. The east wing, far from the curated warmth. She stepped into the estate's main hall and memory attacked her like scent. Rosemary from Eleanor's herb wall, the sharp crisp of chilled champagne, and underneath it all the invisible rot of something once beautiful turning rancid. The marble floors hadn't changed. Neither had the chandeliers dripping like stalactites threatening to fall. But Claire wasn't 17 anymore, barefoot and nervous threading pearls into Vanessa's hair before prom because the designer had canceled last minute. "You saved my night," Vanessa whispered then. That was then. Now Vanessa was a vision of aesthetic symmetry. White silk dress that wasn't quite bridal lips, the color of cranberry sorbet eyes, brimming with a gratitude too performative to be real. She stood at the top of the stairs, holding court like a benevolent queen, waving as Claire entered. "Claire," she sang. "You made it." Claire offered a smile that didn't quite connect to her eyes. Couldn't miss the family reunion. Guests milled around in curated clusters. Political donors, philanthropic socialites, men in perfectly rumpled linen, women who smelled of fig leaf and ambition. Claire's name tag read only Jennings guest. Her seat was 2 tables from the main family arrangement next to a woman named Arlene, who sold stem cell serum to Instagram influencers and had no idea who Claire was. Vanessa's toast arrived with theatrical flair. She clinked her glass with the spoon just so. Family, she began voice-catching, isn't just who raises us. It's who reflects us. They remind us of who we are and who we should never be. A titter of laughter. A few nods. Claire kept her eyes down. Her wine glass remained full untouched. Then Eleanor rose. She floated across the floor in emerald satin, timeless and precise. Her smile was a scalpel. Some people, she said, holding her flute, confuse access with entitlement. Some forget that respect is earned, not assumed. She didn't look at Claire. She didn't have to. The air did it for her. Claire's shoulders stayed square, her jaw relaxed. Then it happened. The room had quieted, but no unexpected movement. Eleanor approached with a grace that misled and then crack. A slap. Sharp. Deliberate. No hesitation. Gasps punctured the silence. Vanessa froze mid-sip. Claire's cheek bloomed red with the shape of her mother's palm, and still she did not speak. Mason clapped once. Then again. "Mom's best performance yet," he said. Frank didn't look up. He simply took a long sip from his glass like he'd timed it. Claire's hand didn't reach for her face. She reached for her coat instead. The red dress rustled as she moved, but her footsteps were steady. No stumbles, no flinch. The butler at the door opened it without being asked. She didn't thank him. Outside, the air hit her with the coldness of early winter, but inside deep where it mattered, something even colder had started to organize. That night, I didn't scream. I didn't post. I made 3 calls. The night air stung, but not like her hand. That was already fading. What stayed was the plan. Claire closed the apartment door behind her with a soft click, not unlike the quiet before detonation. She didn't turn on the lights. The familiar darkness offered focus. Her coat fell onto the armchair, the red dress puddled on the floor like shed skin, and she moved barefoot toward the desk, toward the folder she had named years ago, only half serious. Contingency Jennings. She flipped open the laptop. The screen lit up instantly, no hesitation. Neither did she. The kettle began its crescendo in the background, a soft rising scream she didn't mind. She clicked into encrypted drives passwords stored only in muscle memory. She didn't need to think. She'd been preparing even when she pretended not to. 2 years ago, she'd held Eleanor's trembling hand after surgery, spooning broth into lips too swollen to speak. She'd wiped her mouth, adjusted pillows, spoken gently even when the silence in return was brutal. And then Eleanor had whispered, "I trust you more than them." Claire had believed her. Briefly, enough to stay a little longer before everything unraveled. Now trust was no longer currency. Action was. The first call went out at 12:17 a.m. "Dorian," she said. "Initiate." There was no small talk. Dorian Blake was allergic to it. He responded instantly. "You sure my hand still smells like her perfume?" Claire said. "I've never been more sure." In seconds, the process began. Activate, power of attorney, an old one signed during Eleanor's recovery and never officially revoked. File injunction to freeze the Jennings family trust under review. Request emergency hold citing suspicious activity. Everything automated. Everything real. Timing, she asked. Trust freeze in motion. Probate court flag should trigger before markets open, Dorian said. Anything else? Claire hesitated. Don't call me back unless something's broken. Copy. The second call was to Miranda Cho, forensic accountant, former MIT roommate, still chewed gum like she was in finals week. Dropbox incoming, Claire said. Look for misappropriated charity funds, rerouted payments, anything with Eleanor or Mason's sign-off post-2021. Miranda laughed softly. Finally giving me a puzzle worth losing sleep over. I don't care if you sleep. I care if the numbers match. The Dropbox folder included ledgers, scanned emails, annotated receipts, and a flagged spreadsheet Claire had found last year, back when she still hoped indifference could be enough. Within 10 minutes, Miranda pinged back. Claire, there's a $47,000 charge to community outreach that's actually a villa in Lake Como, listed under Mason's LLC. Want photos? No, just map the pattern. Third call, the last blade. Ro Vega picked up on the first ring. Always did. Got the signal, she said, no greeting. Backup files are moving to the cloud vault now. Encryption holds. If I disappear, you hit the press first, regulators second. No reverse order. Ro's voice was calm. Understood. Anything personal in here I should scrub? No, Claire said. They already erased me. Let them see the ghost. Outside, a truck rumbled past. Inside, the kettle clicked off. Claire sat down, pulled the last manila envelope from her drawer, one of the few physical things she kept. Inside, a copy of Eleanor's 2021 trust amendment. Her signature looked perfect, but the notary stamp was old, expired 6 months before the date. Claire scanned her records. Sure enough, the same notary ID had been used on 3 other documents, all signed post-expiration. Forgery. Sloppy. And Claire had seen that exact signature style before on a lease Mason once faked to kick out a tenant in Brooklyn. Her memory, it seemed, had sharper teeth than any scanner. She lifted her phone fingers, steady now, and whispered, "Make sure it hits by morning." No noise. Just consequences. Dorian's reply was already waiting. Already moving. Claire leaned back, finally sipping the tea she'd forgotten she made. The steam kissed her face, but she felt nothing. Her chest was a vacuum chamber, pressure-controlled, devoid of panic. She didn't react. She executed. At 6:12 a.m., her phone buzzed against the desk. A voicemail. She tapped play. Mason's voice ragged, almost spitting. "What the hell did you just do?" "They brought suits, smiles, and a PR team. I brought evidence." Courtroom 3B smelled of lemon polish and old disappointment. The ceiling fan spun like a lazy pendulum. Thursday morning light filtered through the leaded windows, and just beyond the glass, reporters lingered like crows. Claire walked past them without comment, her heels striking deliberate rhythm on the marble floor. She wore black, not mourning precision. Inside the room was carved from dark wood and formality. Everything felt colder than necessary, including the judge. Wilford sat like carved granite posture, so upright it challenged gravity. A former military prosecutor rumored to have once dismissed a defendant mid-testimony for flapping. Claire didn't plan on flapping. Dorian sat beside her, suit as crisp as his diction, scrolling through a secured tablet. Carlton Merritt, the Jennings family lawyer, adjusted his silver cufflinks and smiled the way crocodiles do, reptilian and timed. Your Honor, Carlton began rising with rehearsed ease. This hearing is at its core a family dispute gone tragically sour. Miss Jennings, while once trusted, has shown repeated patterns of emotional volatility and retaliatory behavior. Her accusations today, though theatrical, are tragically unfounded. Claire didn't blink. Carlton gestured subtly toward the back where Eleanor sat composed. Mason leaned like a painting in disinterest, and Frank was watching Claire, fingers templed like a chess master 2 moves behind. And so, Carlton continued, "We urge the court to recognize these filings as part of a vendetta, a personal campaign rather than a legal one." Dorian stood slowly. "Your Honor," he began, "if this were about vendettas, we'd be here with tabloids. We are here with ledgers, bank statements, notarized documentation. Forged, yes, but notarized." He handed the bailiff a packet. Page 12 compares the original notary ID issued to Amanda Brookston in 2020 with the version used on Eleanor Jennings's trust amendment in March 2021. Brookston's license expired in December 2020. The signature was mimicked, "Your Honor," illegally. Wilford leaned forward. "Proceed." Claire stood holding a flash drive. "With permission, I'd like to submit audio evidence." Carlton scoffed. "Unauthenticated, Your Honor." "Sit down," Mr. Merritt Wilford snapped. The audio filled the courtroom. Frank's voice low and casual. "Put the accounts in Claire's name." "She'll never check." Mason's laughter followed. "She's too busy being Mother Teresa to notice." No one moved. Even Vanessa, hidden in the back row, leaned forward. A wave of whispers rolled through the room. Eleanor's nails scratched against her clutch. Carlton's mouth opened, but no sound emerged. Dorian glanced at Claire. She remained still, gaze locked on the bench. Judge Wilford tapped his pen once. "That's sufficient. The court recognizes grounds for probable fraud and directs immediate federal escalation. Jennings Trust and its subsidiaries will remain frozen pending investigation. Special forensic review is to be scheduled. This hearing is adjourned." The gavel struck like thunder. As the courtroom dispersed, Claire walked past Eleanor, who couldn't quite meet her eyes. Mason stood as if to speak, but said nothing. Frank, expression unreadable, remained seated. Claire pushed open the courthouse doors into the cold November air. Her phone buzzed. Rose's voice was urgent, taut with purpose. "Claire, we have movement at the house. IRS just rolled in. I wasn't there when the agents arrived, but I've seen enough raids on TV to imagine how silence tastes when the knock is federal." The Jennings estate no longer gleamed. The sun hadn't dared break through that morning. Clouds hung like a shroud over the black gates as government sedans lined the driveway. The lead agent had a face made for silence. One by one, the men and women in navy jackets moved through the marble halls, efficient and wordless. Gloves snapped on. Cabinets opened. The safe behind Frank's office, painting a landscape of Wyoming he'd never visited, surrendered its contents without ceremony. Hard drive, ledgers, a notebook encoded in his clumsy shorthand, M89, V&D2E58. By 9:00 a.m., Rowe had sent 3 photos and a 10-second clip. The first showed Frank by the staircase, hands folded, lips thin as cord. The second, Eleanor slumped in a chaise, her mouth parted in disbelief as an agent read her rights. The clip was grainy shoes on hardwood, a woman muttering something about a mistake before being drowned out by the snap of an evidence bag. Claire watched it all from her apartment, one leg tucked beneath her. She didn't smile. She didn't move until her phone vibrated again, this time a name she didn't expect. Vanessa. The knock at the door was soft. When Claire opened it, her sister stood there in jeans and a faded hoodie, makeup-free windburn on her cheeks. In her hands, a tray of lasagna still warm under foil. "I didn't know if you'd answer," Vanessa said. Claire stepped aside without a word. They sat at the small kitchen table. The lasagna steamed between them. Neither reached for it immediately. The apartment was quiet except for the ticking wall clock and the distant hum of a neighbor's television. "You made it?" Claire asked finally. "I bought it, but I reheated it myself," Vanessa said, trying for humor, failing. Claire cut into a corner piece. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was earned. Vanessa stared at her plate. They told me you left because you hated us. Claire raised an eyebrow. But you left, Vanessa continued, voice thinner now, because you knew. Claire said nothing. She let the weight of the admission sit. She'd waited 2 years for someone to speak that sentence. They didn't even try to find out what you were going through, Vanessa added. Dad said you were unstable. Mom said you were too dramatic to lead a company. I built that company from the guest room, Claire said. I signed the first patent on my birthday. You know that, Vanessa nodded. I was there. Another silence. Then Vanessa pulled out her phone and slid it across the table. A video paused at a frame from 2018, Claire helping Vanessa pack a box at college. Claire's face was blurry. Vanessa was crying. I never told them you covered for me, Vanessa whispered. The exam scandal. The one that could have cost me my scholarship. You said it was a data error. You begged the board. Claire looked up slowly. You think I forgot? Vanessa's eyes brimmed now. I didn't. That's why I'm here. Claire leaned back. Are you here to make peace? Vanessa exhaled sharp. No, I'm here to testify. Claire blinked. I remember what Dad said that day in the kitchen. Vanessa continued. He called you a liability. He laughed about it. I'll sign whatever you need. For the first time since the trial, Claire's face softened. Not into a smile, but into something like exhale. They ate a little more. The lasagna wasn't great, but it was hot. When Vanessa finally spoke again, her voice was tight. Dad just filed an emergency motion. Claire looked up. He's asking the judge to label you a security threat to the estate. Claire's fork paused midair. He really thinks I'm dangerous. Vanessa shrugged. He's not wrong. But not for the reason he thinks. It wasn't the stamp that stopped me. It was the handwriting. My name in Grandpa's cursive, shaking but certain. Claire stood by the apartment window, the morning light bruised against the blinds. The envelope had no return address, just a soft ivory surface and the kind of ink people don't use anymore. She held it like it might hum. Inside, a letter on thick parchment, edges feathered with age, and a small USB drive taped to the bottom with surgical care. She read the letter twice before she sat down. Claire, if you're reading this, they buried me with polite lies and Sunday silk. That's fine. I'm not worried about the send-off. I'm worried about you. The cabin in Vermont. The assets in Trust A, they're yours. I left it all clean. No middlemen, no traps. I didn't tell them because they'd have twisted it. I trusted you to rise after they buried you. I saw what they did when you weren't looking. I heard the way your name became a caution sign. I wanted to fix it then. I failed. So I fixed it in paper. Don't burn yourself trying to warm their hands. You owe them nothing. Some truths need snow to stay preserved. This one's yours. Love, WJ. Claire pressed the USB into her laptop. The screen lit up with a timestamp, January 2nd, 2016. Grandpa's face appeared older than she remembered, but his eyes were the same, steel blue with crow's feet carved by kindness. If this plays, he said softly, then the vultures did what vultures do. But they didn't get everything. You see, Claire, families make blood feel like a leash. You cut it once, it never tightens again. Don't flinch. He looked into the lens mouth, twitching upward. And tell Vanessa she deserves her own name, not the one they wrote for her. By noon, Dorian had submitted the documents, verified, cross-checked, watertight. The judge reviewed in record time. Within 48 hours, the estate's control transferred. The fake will backdated and laced with Frank's fingerprints was officially voided. Vanessa signed the final confirmation at Dorian's office, hands steady. He planned it, she said, without being asked. I overheard Dad saying he'd find a way to get Claire committed. Said it would be cleaner than court. I'll sign whatever clears her name. Claire didn't hold a press conference. She didn't step onto the marble steps and deliver a speech. Instead, she booked a single flight north. The cabin was still there. She unlocked the door with the old brass key. It creaked open like a throat clearing itself. Inside, dust drifted in shafts of pale light, and the smell of cedar wrapped her like a blanket from another time. The fireplace stood cold, but she didn't light it yet. First, she unfolded the letter and pinned it beneath the lamp Grandpa used to read under. She stepped back. "They tried to erase me," she whispered. Grandpa made sure I was unerasable. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She exhaled, and something left her body that she hadn't named in years. Over the next weeks, Claire began sketching plans for the Lantern Foundation. No logo yet, but a clear mission fund survivors who'd been quietly crushed by their own blood. Not the dramatic cases, the hidden ones, the ones whispered about but never named. She never returned Eleanor's calls. Frank's legal team filed one last motion. It was denied. Mason moved to Prague. Vanessa started therapy. Claire stayed. Outside, snow began to fall. Inside, something finally settled. Not vengeance, not victory, just peace. The war she never asked for ended not with noise, but with truth written in her name. Justice, long delayed, arrived quietly unfolded through paper silence and the courage to act when no one believed her. In a world where betrayal wears pearls and smiles for the press, it takes uncommon strength to stay standing when your own blood turns bitter. Because when injustice is met with unwavering resolve, even buried truths find a way to rise. And sometimes peace doesn't come after victory, it comes after being unerasable.